I'm Maria. My birth mother passed away in a tragic accident when I was just 6. For a long time, it was just my dad and me. My dad, a typical office worker, and my mom, a full-time homemaker. The meals my mom made were delicious. She had a knack for baking, and our snack time often included her homemade cookies and cakes. She was a rock, always warm and caring. After losing her, my dad, in between his busy job, tried his very best to take care of me and our home. I remember him struggling, especially with cooking. He often made my favorite dish, curry, but sometimes the vegetables would be undercooked and crunchy. I, being a young kid, would sometimes cry and complain about it. Yet, he'd just laugh and say,
"Sorry for my bad cooking."
the meals weren't as good as when mom was around, and the house became a tad messier. But I still had a happy childhood. When I started elementary school, I began helping out, taking on chores like laundry and cleaning the bathroom. Dad and I would share the household tasks. But one day, our lives took a dramatic turn. During the summer of my 6th grade, my dad said,
"I've got someone I'd like you to meet. Let's dine out tomorrow."
so I dressed up a little and we went to a restaurant. I was nervous entering this upscale place I'd never been to before. As we were led by the waiter, I could see the back of a woman already seated at her table. As she noticed us, she stood up, turned around, and said with a warm smile,
Nice to meet you, Maria.
she was a woman in her late 20s, quite younger than my dad, who was nearing 40. She had glossy black hair curled to her shoulders and was wearing a simple, elegant beige maxi dress. She looked very refined and beautiful. Her name was Kalima, my dad introduced. Both of them tried to engage me in light-hearted conversations, which helped ease my initial tension. As we were almost done with our meal, my dad, looking rather serious, said,
"I'm thinking of marrying her."
although I had somehow sensed it, I was at a loss for words. Perhaps not noticing my confusion, my dad added with a beaming smile,
"You must have been lonely without a mom, right? Kalima will be your new mom from now on."
something about that statement bothered me. While Kalima was very approachable and I even admired her beauty, considering her as my mom was another story. I'm not lonely. Even if she's gone, I only have one mom, I retorted. My dad looked distressed at my downturned face. The awkward silence was broken by Kalima.
Maria, you don't have to think of me as your mom. You're right, a person has only one mom. Just think of me as a new friend. So, just call me Kalima.
Feeling guilty that I might have hurt her feelings, I hesitantly looked up. She was smiling warmly. Feeling reassured, I just nodded and said, okay. A few weeks later, the three of us began our new life together. My dad was always swamped with work, so ever since I was in the upper grades of elementary school, he often wouldn't get home until around 8 p.m. Even though I was used to it, deep down I was lonely. So, when Kalima came into our lives, I was delighted to have her company. We'd cook dinner together or chat while watching TV. With her upbeat and friendly nature, she was easy to talk to. Our bond grew stronger, and I even began confiding in her about my school troubles. About 2 months after starting our life with Kalima, came my 12th birthday. That day, Dad managed to leave work early. We celebrated with homemade dishes Kalima prepared and a cake my dad bought. I was elated to receive the music player I'd been wishing for. My mood was soaring high, and so was Dad's, probably helped by the drinks. He ended up lying down on the carpet, fast asleep, and even when we tried to get his attention, he wouldn't budge. The sight was so amusing that Kalima and I couldn't help but laugh together. Then, Kalima said,
Maria, I actually have another gift for you.
presenting a pristine white box tied with a silver ribbon. I was completely surprised and overjoyed. I eagerly opened the box, and inside was a beautiful silver bracelet adorned with a star motif. It looked so sophisticated, almost adult-like, and I was absolutely thrilled. It's so pretty. Thank you, Kalima. Upon hearing that, she said,
I'm glad you like it. Look, it matches the one I have.
She then showed me her bracelet, which had a moon motif. I loved it so much that I wanted to wear it every day. However, I was afraid it might get damaged or scratched. So, I decided only to wear it on special occasions when I dressed up. I kept it on my study desk, in a place where it stood out, and gazing at it every night became one of my favorite moments. I grew to love Kalima just as much. However, when I entered 8th grade in the spring, Kalima's attitude towards me changed dramatically. One day, after hanging out with my friends at a fast food joint, I returned home around 6 p.m. to find Kalima waiting at the entrance. "I'm home." But instead of her usual greeting, she said,
Why are you so late? School's been out for hours.
"I was just chatting with my friends." As I tried to walk past her to the living room, she stopped me.
You're not done yet. If you want to go out and play, at least get some studying done after you come home from school.
She said such things to me. I couldn't imagine Kalima saying something like that. At first, I thought she was joking, but her serious expression told me otherwise. "I promise I'll study when I get back home." No matter how many times I said that, she wouldn't understand. So, I stopped making detours after school. But that wasn't the only change in Kalima. She became stricter in many other ways. She would check the bathtub I cleaned and say,
It's not clean enough. Do it again.
she tasted the food I made and said,
It's too salty and not tasty.
when I ironed my dad's shirt, she would point out,
There are still wrinkles. Do it properly.
she seemed to nitpick every single thing I did. I hadn't changed the way I did things, and in the 2 years of living with Kalima, she'd never been this critical. Finally, at my wit's end, I confronted Kalima. "Kalima, why are you always so mean to me? Don't you like me anymore?"
That's not true. I'm sorry.
I said, hoping we could patch things up and get back to the way things were. Yet, Kalima responded with,
Well, who knows?
I was in shock, and before I could say anything, Kalima continued, not even looking me in the eyes.
If you have time to get upset with me, why not study? Do you really think you can become a teacher with those grades?
That has nothing to do with what we're talking about right now. True, ever since I was in elementary school, I dreamed of becoming a school teacher. When my mother passed away, my then class teacher was so kind to me, and it meant the world.
It's absolutely related. You can't expect to become a teacher when you're always playing around. That's too naive.
Kalima was right. When I first started middle school, I took my studies seriously. But by the fall of the first year, I was more interested in hanging out with friends, watching TV, and playing games. Even when I tried to study, I could hardly concentrate. As a result, my grades were so bad that it'd be quicker to count from the bottom. Feeling cornered, I retorted, "It's because you dump all the housework on me that I don't have time to study." Kalima snapped back,
You're being taken care of and you still complain? It's only right you contribute a little.
I was left speechless. As days like this continued, being around Kalima became increasingly stressful. I found myself spending more time in my room. I didn't even want to look at the bracelet I'd once cherished and placed it deep inside a drawer. One day, my father, noticing something was wrong, came into my room and asked,
Is something bothering you?
I had thought that if I told him about Kalima, he would surely be on my side. But to my surprise, he said,
Kalima is a wonderful mother. Miria, you're only seeing things on the surface.
I thought to myself, it's my father who's only seeing things on the surface. He's so infatuated with Kalima as a woman that he doesn't realize how terribly she treats me. There was no one in the house to stand up for me. I felt completely alone. In my despair, I decided to leave home and headed to the train station, intending to go to a friend's house in the next town over. It was already past 11 p.m., a time I'd never been outside by myself. The nighttime scenery was so different from the daytime, and I was on edge. Drunken adults shouting, scantily clad women from the nightclubs, flashy suited men with spiky hair trying to attract customers. I walked quickly, trying to get past them as soon as possible. But suddenly, someone grabbed my arm from behind. I turned around, hoping to see my dad chasing after me, but instead, there stood a man I didn't recognize. He looked like bad news, and I felt a rush of fear. "What do you want?" Before I could even finish my sentence, he interjected,
You a middle schooler? It's dangerous for a young lady like you to be walking around here at this time.
I was heading to the train station to visit a friend.
He quickly responded, I'll escort you then. It's not safe, you know.
He grabbed my arm. I was scared, but thought if he's just escorting me to the station, it might be okay. But as we walked, he led me towards a more deserted area. "This isn't the way to the station." Ignoring my protests, he said,
It's okay. It's a shortcut.
He kept pulling me along, not budging even when I resisted. Too frightened to scream, I realized we were heading further and further from the station. I felt helpless against the strength of this man, thinking to myself, what's going to happen to me? I regretted leaving my house. "Someone, please help." As tears streamed down my face, I suddenly heard the rapid footsteps of someone charging towards us. Out of nowhere, the stranger was forcefully knocked away from me. The force of the impact released my arm from the man's grip. At the same time, the person who had tackled him grabbed my arm and pulled me back in the direction from which I had come. As we ran, I realized it was Kalima. Why would she help me? I thought she didn't like me. Did she chase me all the way here? Even though I was scared, the thought made me feel grateful and happy. When we finally reached my house, I was about to thank her when she exclaimed,
What on earth were you thinking, going out alone at this hour? If you can't defend yourself against a man like that, you better think twice before acting. Never do something so reckless again.
Instead of the gratitude I had expected, Kalima, with a flushed face, was scolding me. It was because of how cold she was to me that I had thought of running away. Now, my feelings of gratitude were crushed, replaced with sadness. "It's all because of you, Kalima. You don't get it," I shouted as I rushed into the house and went straight to my room. Recalling the events of the night, I buried my face in my bed and cried. Whether I'm outside or at home, I always feel utterly alone. After a few minutes, I heard my father shouting loudly from outside my room. Wiping away my tears, I stepped out to see what was going on, only to find Kalima lying motionless in the entranceway. "What happened? Why is Kalima on the floor?" I asked, looking over to my father. He was cradling Kalima in his arms, tears streaming down his face. I was completely shocked and couldn't grasp the situation. I stood there, frozen, unable to do anything but stare. Kalima's face was pale, a stark contrast to the flushed, angry look from earlier, and she seemed unconscious. Soon after, an ambulance my father had called arrived.
Maria, come with me.
My father said, and so I accompanied them to the hospital. After some time at the hospital, we were allowed to visit her room. I was taken aback by the sight before me. Kalima was connected to numerous tubes and looked completely different than she did just moments before. There were several doctors and nurses gathered around her. Kalima, who had kept her eyes closed, faintly opened them. One of the nurses said,
Family members,
and gestured for my father and me to come closer to Kalima. As I got closer, Kalima, with a feeble smile, looked at me. All I could muster was, "What's wrong? Are you sick, Kalima? I don't understand." However, instead of answering, Kalima softly said,
You shouldn't be up this late. Make sure you go to bed early and focus on your studies.
"How can I sleep at a time like this? Studying is the last thing on my mind right now," I retorted. With cold hands, Kalima took hold of mine.
Promise me you'll become a school teacher. I won't forgive you if you don't.
"I will, I promise," I replied. Her hand was so cold, I was left speechless. My father, too, spoke to her, trying to comfort her. Kalima softly said,
Thank you, both of you.
as if taking a deep breath. A long beeping sound came from the machine beside her. Even as a child, I understood what that sound meant. Kalima had passed away. Strangely, I didn't cry. I felt a void, realizing she's really gone, but I couldn't tell if I was truly sad. My father, however, cried continuously during the funeral and the viewing. I felt deeply sorry for him. It's been a week since Kalima passed away. My dad and I were cleaning up her room, sorting through her belongings. As I was going through Kalima's stuff, I felt a mix of sadness and loneliness and frustration about how she had been cold towards me. I started venting to my dad. Did she act so distant because she was sick and not feeling well? But even then, she changed so much. Did she end up resenting me because we are blood related? After a brief silence, my dad began.
Well, Kalima told me not to say anything, but
That's when I first learned the truth. Apparently, not long after I started middle school, it was discovered that Kalima had a terminal illness. You're saying she was sick for over a year? Why didn't she tell me? She seemed perfectly fine, even being tough on me. My dad then said,
Kalima intentionally acted that way, you know.
"What do you mean? Intentionally?" I asked, not understanding at all.
Once Kalima realized she had a terminal illness and had only a few years to live, she began thinking about what she could do for you.
My dad shared, a revelation that made me stop the cleaning process in shock.
Firstly, she wanted to make sure you'd be well prepared with household chores when you get married.
Images of Kalima insisting on me doing all the household chores, meticulously checking every detail, came flooding back.
Next, she wanted to support you wholeheartedly in achieving your dreams.
I recalled how Kalima constantly pushed me to study in his last words to me.
Lastly, she didn't want you to experience the pain of losing a mother figure twice. So, she made you resent her.
Hearing these words from my dad, everything suddenly connected in my mind. Before I realized it, tears streamed down my face for the first time since Kalima's death. I couldn't hold them back. All of Kalima's actions, which I perceived as cold, harsh, and mean, were out of love for me. I had been completely oblivious to that all along. Kalima had intentionally acted distant and cold towards me. I had spent 2 years with her, and deep down, I knew she wasn't truly like that. If I had been more thoughtful and had approached the situation calmly, if I had just been kinder, I surely would have understood what Kalima was trying to communicate to me. Why couldn't I realize it while she was still alive? Even though I understand now, I can't express my gratitude to Kalima anymore. A torrent of frustration and regret flowed out of me, manifesting as tears.
Also, she wanted you to have this.
My dad handed me a beautiful box with a design resembling the night sky. Within the vast expanse of the depicted sky was an oddly shaped indentation. Near this indentation was a familiar moon motif, perfectly nestled within the indentation. Recognizing what might fit this empty space, I rushed back to my room. I dug deep into my drawer and fetched a bracelet Kalima had given me, with a star motif that fit perfectly into the box's indentation. With a soft click, the lid unlocked, revealing a diamond pendant inside. Seeing the pendant, I was trembling. My father spoke gently to me.
It's designed with a lock that only you would understand how to open. Kalima said it was a secret between the two of you. It's a special gift from a mother to her daughter. She intended to give it to you when you got married.
I had always been defiant towards Kalima, always assuming she must have been annoyed with me. Yet, she cherished me as if I were her real daughter. Tears streaming down my face, I sobbed. I never did anything for Kalima. I was so ignorant, always talking back. Dad wrapped his arm around me, saying,
Kalima's greatest wish was to see you achieve your dreams and be happy.
He tenderly stroked my head. That night, Dad and I reminisced about Kalima for hours. But I ensured I went to bed by 9 p.m., waking up early the next day during summer break to study. Even though I had no plans to go out, I wore the diamond pendant that Kalima had given me. Fast forward 10 years. I've started working as an elementary school teacher. While I haven't told Dad yet, I have a boyfriend I'm thinking of marrying. If one day we have a daughter, I've decided to pass on Kalima's star motif bracelet and diamond pendant to her. I've treasured them all these years.